February 4th, Town Council meeting, and a Happy New Year to everyone. Christian, are we in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, sir, we are.
Thank you. Could you please make the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Harkins?
Here.
Mr. Ames?
Here.
Mrs. Becker?
Here.
Mr. Lennox?
Here.
Mr. Stanford?
Here.
And Mayor McCann,
Here.
all
Could
present.
you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The invocation today will be given by Chaplain Glenn Neff. Chaplain.
I'm here. Yes. Thank you, Mayor McCann, for inviting Island Chaplain and friends to offer the invocation for you and our town council meeting today. Let me just say a word. Island Chaplain and Friends celebrates its 29th year this month of spiritually supporting our hospitals and our town's residents, as well as our visitors in times of need. Last year, our chaplains gave spiritual support to over 800 patients, their families, and the staff at both Hilton Head Hospital and Coastal Carolina Hospital. Please join me in prayer as we open this meeting. Eternal God, you and your truths last forever. We thank you and honor you for the beauty of our land in this special place called Hilton Head Island, and for the many blessings and benefits that you have for living here, which is truly a blessing to each of our peoples. At this, the beginning of months for 2022, help us to lay aside the troubles and difficulties of this past year. Give us insight to utilize the lessons learned. We were challenged greatly in our community, in our homes, in our finances, in our health, in our houses of worship, and even in our faith. Yet by your grace we endured, and now we place our hope and trust in you, Almighty God. In this new year, with its new opportunities, new expectations, and new resolves to master, help us to have renewed energy, deeper passion, and greater wisdom, so we may in turn help each other to achieve the common goal of making this a better world to live in, a better and more peaceful world in the future for all peoples. And now, dear God, for those who sit in the seats of the council, our town leaders, we pray you will bless and guide them to lead us with compassion and kindness, fairness and courage, and above all, wisdom, as they in turn guide this town into the future, a future that will benefit and improve the quality of life for every member of our community. On this day and for this year, we offer this prayer up to you, Almighty God, and may God bless us, each one. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chaplain. Okay, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, approval of the minutes of the town council meeting of December 7th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your right hand again. Are there any changes to the minutes? Thank you. Okay, report of the town manager.
Yes, sir. Afternoon, Mayor, Council. First and foremost, Happy New Year on behalf of town staff to all of you and to our wonderful community. So I'm excited. I know staff is excited and focused to kick off our strategic plan this year. So just some real quick remarks on that. We've hit the ground running this year, and I've been working with the mayor to start figuring out some workshop dates. Lots of great things to work on together: capacity planning and assessment, Mid-Island redevelopment area, Mid-Island Park crossings, Chaplain Park, a housing workshop, I believe, we're aiming for in February, early February, as well as some work on our William Hilton Parkway corridor and some of our other corridors. So really excited about that. Just so you know, and the community knows what we're up to here as we kick off the new year. Next on the agenda, USCB, Hilton Head Island Hospitality Management Facility, has been honored with a design award by the South Carolina chapter of the American Institute of Architects. A little bit of notes on that before my time, but from afar, I just admired the public-private partnership of the facility and the program, and definitely the architecture, how much it brought to our community. And so knowing that South Carolina, the chapter of the American Institute of Architects provided the award is great. A little reminder, it was funded through TIF funds with USCB, designed by Leolio, I believe I said that right, Architecture in Charleston, as well as Bielowski. I've practiced that a couple times today. Bielowski, Cleveland, and construction by Fraser Construction. Congrats to them as well. The ribbon cutting was all the way back in 2018. And with that being said, Krista has a little brief video on the award and that she'll share with you right now. So congrats to all of you and to USCB.
No sound. Okay, and that's the end of it, and I apologize, there was no sound. We tested once and it's not working, and I apologize.
All right, up next, if you stop sharing, Krista, let's move on from that. Goodness.
Dr. Calvert's on the line as well.
Yes, Dr. Calvert. If Dr. Calvert's on the line and want to say a few words, please do so.
Thank you so much, Town Manager Orlando, and of course, Mayor and Town Council. I just want to say that we at USCB, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we at USCB would like to thank the Town Council, the town staff, and the Hilton Head Island citizens for their unwavering support of hotel, restaurant, tourism, management, education on the island. You know, the USCB Town of Hilton Head Island collaboration actually started with our first ATAX grant for the Hilton Head Island Institute of Tourism in 1997 when we started conducting tourism research. It continued with the CEHMT, the Center for Event Management and Hospitality Training Grant in 2012. And of course, as the town manager just mentioned, ended with the TIF funding of the hospitality campus, which opened in 2019. This award-winning campus design was a result of public-private cooperation with immense stakeholder support. The town staff and the architects, Leolio, and with the assistance of Bielowski out of Cleveland, Fraser Construction, USCB and USC faculty and staff, local review boards, and many others collaborated on this project. The result, this campus is perfect for the purpose intended, a world-class learning laboratory for USCB students and a meeting place for town residents. We see many of you here every week. USCB students are studying hospitality management and working in the industry working on the island and industry. And I just want to thank you. And we're so excited that this building was given the Merit Award by the AIA chapter in South Carolina. And I also really want to mention Jennifer Ray, who was really the partner with us from the very beginning, saw this through, and we have a world-class facility, which is befitting of Hilton Head Island. So thank you, all of you, town council and town staff. Thank you.
Wonderful. Good to see you as well, Charlie. And thanks for everything you do. Congrats again to everybody. Next, where's my agenda? The Town of Hilton Head Island financial audit presentation for fiscal year ending June 30, 2021 from Green Finney LLP, our CPA. Miss Emily Sobchak is here with us. I saw Emily on the screen. There you are. Hi, Emily. Thanks for joining us. Emily is with the firm, of course, Green Finney, and we've been engaged with Green Finney, the CPAs, over the last several years to perform our independent annual audit. We've received an unmodified opinion from Green Finney, which is a clean bill of health, so to speak. Financially, I believe, and based upon the audit and Mr. Lennox's great leadership through the Finance and Administration Committee, as well as Mr. Troyer, our Finance Director, we're managing our funds so well, especially and including during this time of pandemic. After the meeting, as always, in our practice is to put the annual audit, the annual report on the town's website, so it will be available. Mayor and council, you will also be provided, if not already, a hard copy of the audit. I received mine this afternoon, and that will be available to you. And if we need to, and you need to, we can set some time aside to review in more detail the CAFR as presented. And so with that, Emily, if you have some thoughts and assessment to share, please do so.
Sure, and I'm going to share my presentation. Give me just a moment. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that all right. Yes, thank you. I'm Emily Sobchak, and as you mentioned, I've been overseeing the town's financial statement audit for a few years now, and always such a pleasure to work with the town, so we thank you for the opportunity. Before we get into the financial results, I do like to remind you that the financial report, all of the financial information, including the disclosures in that report, are the town's responsibility. And so it is important that the town maintains good, effective policies and procedures to mitigate the risk of misstatement in that financial information. And that's important not only for year-end audit purposes, but also throughout the year, so that you know that you can rely on the financial information that you're provided, so that you can make good strategic decisions for the town. Our responsibility then as your auditor is to audit the financial information provided and issue an opinion based on our audit. We did, again, issue an unmodified opinion. And as you mentioned, that is the clean opinion. That's the opinion that you want to receive. And that opinion provides reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct. So a couple of key phrases there. We are providing reasonable, not absolute assurance, and that the financial statements are materially correct. So it's important to understand that a financial statement audit does not involve us looking at every single transaction that occurred during the year. Rather, we're using some professional judgment in determining what we reviewed during the audit process. So let's get into your results. General fund had an increase in fund balance of about 3.6 million, bringing total general fund balance to 25.7 million as of June 30th. Now included in that is amounts committed by council for disaster recovery of 17.6 million. You also have assignments of 424,000 for town council initiatives. So when we take out those designated amounts, we're left with unassigned fund balance, which is what is truly available for future operations, of 7.7 million. And that represents just under 19% of your actual 2021 expenditures, or 17.5% of your budgeted fiscal 2022 expenditures. So a good, healthy fund balance. We do include a benchmark that's provided by the Government Finance Officers Association. That's a national organization that provides guidance for local governments. And they say that you should maintain a minimum of about 2 months, or just under 17% of your operating expenditures in your general fund balance. So as you can see, your fund balance is slightly in excess of that level. Now, you might wonder why should we be maintaining this fund balance? Is that a reasonable approach? And the answer is definitely yes. Your fund balance allows you to meet cash flow needs for the second half of the calendar year. As you know, your significant revenue source, your property tax revenues, don't start coming in until the tail end of the calendar year, really into January. And so having a healthy fund balance allows you to meet the cash flow needs over the last 6 months of the calendar year without having to issue short-term financing for your operating needs. It also allows you to get better interest rates when you do issue long-term debt. And it provides you with some additional flexibility in making strategic decisions for the town. Now, looking at the general fund activity for the year, you had revenues and net other financing sources of $44.5 million. That was an 11% increase from the prior year, as you saw some pretty significant increases in both your accommodations taxes and your business licenses. And you're also just slightly better than what you had budgeted by 2%. And again, the bulk of that was driven by your accommodations taxes. On the expenditure side, we had $41 million for the year. That was a 5.5% increase from the prior year, but you were 7% below what you had budgeted. And that was primarily due to intentional conservative spending as you kind of waited to see what the impacts of the pandemic were going to be on your operating revenues. So when we combine all of your governmental funds together, so taking your general fund, special revenue funds, debt service, and capital projects funds, we're looking at total activity for the town, revenues and net other financing sources of $99.1 million, compared to total expenditures of $83.6 million. In addition to your governmental funds, you also report the Stormwater Fund, which is reported as an enterprise fund because it does operate more like a business. The charges for service are expected to cover the expense. And so the Stormwater Fund had an increase in net position of $159,000, bringing total net position to $10 million as of June 30th. Now, because the Stormwater Fund, in addition to the current assets and liabilities that are reported by governmental funds, the Stormwater Fund also reports long-term assets and long-term obligations. So it's important to understand that when we look at that total net position, a large part of that, about $6.8 million, is invested in your capital assets, so not in liquid form. The activity for the Stormwater Fund was pretty consistent with the prior year, about a 2.5% increase in your operating revenues compared to a 6.5% increase in your operating expenses. So now let's look at your town-wide long-term assets and obligations. You've got total capital assets of $294 million as of June 30th. That includes about $281 million in your governmental activities and $13.5 million for business type activities, which is your stormwater. That's an increase from the prior year of $7.5 million for governmental activities and about $400,000 for your stormwater fund. And as you can see, we've included several of the significant projects that were ongoing and completed during the year. On the long-term obligation side, you're looking at total long-term obligations as of June 30th of $126.7 million. That was a decrease from the prior year as your scheduled principal payments exceeded debt issuances. As you see, we do note there that you did issue some refunding bonds during the year. Those refunding bonds were used to fully refund the outstanding 2011 GO bonds and partially refund the outstanding 2013 GO bonds, which resulted in some pretty nice interest savings there. Another long-term obligation that we are that continued to be required to report is your net pension liability. As you'll recall, this is related to your participation in the state police officers retirement system. And so this liability of $19 million represents your allocated piece of the total unfunded actuarial liability of the system. And so it is very important to understand that that is not a liability that you're ever expected to just write a check to pay off. You couldn't do it if you wanted to. Rather, it represents an estimate of future benefits to be paid to retirees. And so while the liability itself does not have an impact on your cash flows, the mandated employer contribution rates, which have been increasing consistently over the last number of years, those do have a direct impact on your operating budget. So it's important that you understand that for fiscal 21, you were looking at a rate of 18.2%. That rate has increased to 19.2% for fiscal 22, and it will continue to increase by 1% annually until we reach a rate of 21.2% in fiscal 2024. So as you can understand, those are some pretty significant increases when we consider the impact on your personnel budget. For fiscal 21, we did implement one new accounting standard. That's GASB number 84, which provided new guidance on fiduciary activities. Didn't have a terribly significant impact on your financial report, but it did move the firefighters' 1% balances from being reported as a fiduciary fund. It moved those into your special revenue funds. So just something to note, simply geography in your report. For fiscal 22, we will be implementing GASB number 87, which provides new guidance on leases. And so again, I don't expect this to have a significant impact on your financials, but as we gather that information and audit it for fiscal 2022, we'll be sure to let you know of what its impacts are. So in each year, when your federal expenditures exceed $750,000, you're required to have an additional audit, a compliance audit. We refer to it as a single audit. And that is where we do some direct auditing related to your federal programs. This year, we were required to look at two different programs, the FEMA program and CDBG. And I'm pleased to say that we have no findings related to either of those programs. We do have one compliance finding related to your financial statement audit, and that relates to the collateralization of deposits. So as you may know, because you hold public funds, the state requires all funds held in depository accounts to be covered either by FDIC insurance or by collateral held by the financial institutions. And so you have agreements with your financial institutions that they will hold collateral for any deposits in excess of that FDIC insurance. Unfortunately, this year, Wells Fargo, due to a manual error on their side, they improperly assigned the collateral to your funds. Now, this was just a one-day error. It was due to a manual process that they do on June 30th that is designed to ensure that the collateral is properly assigned. But as we know, with a manual process, those are more prone to error. And so on June 30th, unfortunately, you were not fully collateralized. They recognized the error on July 1st and corrected it and notified you of the problem. And so I know that they will be more alert than ever next year to ensure that this is not a recurring problem. But unfortunately, because you were not compliant with that state requirement as of June 30th, we were required to report that in your financial statements. So in addition to your financial report, we also issue a management letter each year. It provides required communications from us to management and to council. And this is another place where from time to time we may have a significant recommendation that we'd like to include in writing to you. No matters of that nature to report this year. So in summary, an unmodified opinion on your financial statements, strong financial condition as of June 30th, and excellent work by John and his whole team. They are always so wonderful to work with, so knowledgeable, and so intent on doing things the right way. So thank you to them. I know y'all appreciate them as much as we do. I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all might have.
Any questions by members of the council?
Mayor, it's not really a question, but it was a pretty swift presentation of a lot of facts, and for a feeble financial mind, I wondered if it might be useful for the Finance Committee to add to an agenda item at their next meeting to have a brief discussion about what all this means and allow some members of council to ask questions in that environment.
I think it's a wonderful idea, Mr. Ames, and Mr. Lennox, can you take care of that, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the financials? Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Toledo.
Mayor, Council, that concludes the report.
Okay, thank you. There is general reports by council members. Are there any general reports? Who we lose? Tammy?
Mayor, I just have one thing. I wanted to take an opportunity at the first of the year to remind everyone that it's a good time to check your batteries in your fire alarms, make sure that they are working properly. They save lives. And I wanted to also mention that I sat in on a meeting, I guess it was yesterday, from the fire, Deputy Fire Marshal Chief was giving with regard to fire in the streets, which sounds like a wonderful program, and another opportunity for folks to make sure that their fire alarms are installed properly and working as intended. And I wish everyone a happy, safe new year. Thank you.
Any other general reports? Okay, today I talked to the CEO of the hospital, Joel, about the activity in the hospital for the new virus. And he said there is an activity in rates of people coming to the hospital. There are now 13 people admitted to the hospital, 2 in the ICU units, as compared with 4 on December 12th. Staffing is a challenge. In fact, one day last week, they had to divert some of our AMS out to Hardyville. So in all, they're doing well. They're prepared for it. They have plenty of beds available, and things are going well, as well can be. Second thing is that as we get into the new year, I've asked Phyllis to set up a meeting with each of us individually, myself and each of you individually, to determine and look at what we really want to accomplish the last year that I'm going to be here, maybe. So the last year of this administration, this is what we really need, what we can really do together, what our priorities are, so we can come up with one uniform set of priorities for all of us. I think it's an opportunity for the first 6 months of this year to address some issues, take care of some small issues, to work on some big issues. And I'm really looking forward to work with all of you individually and collectively in doing that. I think we have a great start and a great team, and I'm sure we'll all work out very well. Now, we talked earlier about the signs on the town-owned property. We have to be careful here, but I think it's a good idea. Some of the town-owned property is paid for through citizens through referendum money. Some of the town-owned property is paid through the real estate tax. We have to make sure the wording on there is correct, but I will work with the town manager. We will come back to you at our next meeting. I've asked Kristen now to put it on the agenda to discuss what the status of it is and where we are. And I'll ask Bill's committee, I'll ask David's committee on public planning to work with us as well. Having said that, that's the end of my report. Report on the local.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr.
I'm
Brown.
sorry. Just want to get some clarification on your report from the CEO of the hospital.
Yes, sir.
Did you say that we had to lend some of our EMS services to the Hardyville location?
Some of our EMS people had to go to Hardyville with cases rather than go here, because at that particular time, the hospital wasn't available to take the cases.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you for that. You know, Mr. Mayor, if we could, being that our hospital is very unique with our population as it is, with the majority retirement age and the influx of tourists during the season. I know that there's always a strain on the hospital. And if the CEO could provide us with some hard data in terms of his lacking in staff, I think that would be important for us as a council to consider as we move forward with our affordable housing discussion. You know, when I think about medical services here on Hilton Head, you know, that's a big priority, along with, of course, fire and rescue, police services, and so on. But we're talking about, in some cases, unfortunately, the matter of life and death when someone enters into our hospital. And for us not to be able to provide enough staffing to take care of that, at least in my mind, that's not just a hospital issue. That's a community issue. So I think we need to understand that a little bit better. So we can gather as much information from that agency, just so we're a little bit more smart on it, I think is appropriate. Thank you, sir.
Just 2 things, Alex, is that one is that when we talk about capacity, the hospital should be pretty close to the top of our list. You can't do a capacity study without talking about the hospital. The second of all, I'll ask Christian, I'll talk to myself, to have the CEO of the hospital here from our February meeting. Tom?
Thank you, John. I'd like to follow up on the AIA award to USCB. As we all know, that Pope Avenue TIF district, the first real significant project was the USCB campus construction, followed closely thereafter with the reconfiguration of the Pope Avenue New Orleans intersection. In addition to that, we recently opened Celebration Park by using TIF funding as well. The purpose of the TIF funding and the establishment of a TIF district is to stimulate the right kind of private investment, to stimulate economic development and redevelopment. And as we step back and take a look at the past 7 or 8 or 10 years in that TIF district, that's exactly what happened. So I'd like to say congratulations again to Charlie Calvert and President Al Panu from USCB, and equally as important to town staff, leadership, and council for being able to execute on that TIF district to stimulate an enormous amount of private investment, in my opinion, that accrued to virtually the entire community. Really, really a good job.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, if not, we'll go into the low country area transportation study. Mr. Stanford?
Thank you, Mayor. I have no report. There was no meeting.
Okay, Low Country Council of Governments, Ms. Becker?
I do not have a report this evening, Mayor. Thank you.
South Carolina Florida Water Commission?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So Loco, Mr. Lennox?
John, there was no December meeting. The next local meeting will be February 22nd.
Good. Report on the airport board, Mr. Ames?
No report for this month.
Thank you. Community Services and Public Safety, Mr. Hawkins?
No report at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Good. Public Planning Committee? Mr.
Yes,
Ames?
Mayor, the Public Planning Committee met on December 16th to discuss several items. Two major ones, Islanders Beach Park and the parking study. On Islanders Beach, the Public Planning Committee forwarded a series of recommendations to staff that included a definition for resident parking fees, limiting shuttle drop-offs, bike and pedestrian access. And we expect that staff will come back to public planning in the January 27th meeting with its response to those recommendations. And then secondly, the Public Planning Committee approved a request by staff to go out with an RFQ, a request for qualifications on the parking study to assist in developing a pragmatic implementation strategy for beach parking. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lennox, F&A?
The next F&A meeting will be January 18th at 10 o'clock.
Thank you. Krista, appearance by citizens?
Yes, sir. We have one citizen that had signed up to address town council today, and that was Mr. Hoagland. I was just notified that he has not joined the meeting. So with your permission, I'd like to close appearance by citizens.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Consider it done. Mr. Lando, you have a workshop presented today?
Yes, sir. Mayor and Council, an update for you today, a brief overview on the William Hilton Parkway Corridor Project. I believe it was back in October where we last formally met. You provided a series of recommendations and asked me to go talk with the South Carolina Department of Transportation Secretary, Ms. Christy Hall, and her team, as well as the Beaufort County, Mr. Eric Greenway and his team. We met, as we know, in October. We've been working on it for a couple months, and Sean Cullen is on the screen somewhere. Hi, Sean, I see you. to provide an overview of work to date since the meeting, really what we're still working on, and then some proposed next steps, and of course, some time for your discussion today with any questions that, as much as we can answer them for you. So thank you, and thank you, Sean, once again for always being on top of this project. Very proud of you.
Thanks, Mark, Mayor and Council. Happy New Year. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Mark's covered a little bit of the lead in here. Everyone see my screen presentation?
Yep.
Okay. Again, thanks for allowing me the opportunity to provide you an update on the William Hilton Parkway, the Gateway Corridor. We did an awful lot of work from April through October to get the town in a position to make recommendations, keep enhancements to the project and recommendations that we could then have a discussion with SCDOT and the county on. I'm going to pick up on October 12th and we'll move forward from that date if that works for everyone. So just a reminder, this information will be available on the town's website under the project page after today's presentation. But just a reminder to the council and the public, on October 12th, council approved 26 key project enhancements and recommendations for the Gateway Corridor project. They were meant to enhance the local preferred alternative that was shared during the public hearing throughout the summer by the county and SCDOT as their managing partner. Upon council's approval, we shared those recommendations directly with SCDOT and Beaufort County for their consideration. We swiftly met with Secretary Hall and some members of her staff, as well as the county administrator and his staff on October 14th, so just 2 days after your approval. The tone of the meeting was very positive. It was a meeting where there was a lot of support for the recommendations that were approved and provided by council. So in general terms, very positive support. As we talked about leading into your approval, there were some recommendations that we thought were tangentially related to the project, but not necessarily part of what the DOT and the county would include in the project scope. So we had some general support, and then various recommendations were slightly outside of the scope or outside of the scope completely. And the key point there to note is for the funding that was available for this project, SCDOT committed funding for the deficient bridge, Mackey Creek Bridge, and the SIB through the application for funding through the State Infrastructure Bank had some very specific goals that were part of that application. And so there are some project elements that are outside of those scopes and outside of those sources of funding that would need to be funded locally through the local sales tax money or additional sources of funding to be identified. I want to let you know that the county signed the intergovernmental agreement with the State Infrastructure Bank. The county is the project sponsor. They were the applicant to the SIB for the money, and they've signed the intergovernmental agreement, which basically outlines the management structure and how they'll work forward to implement the project going forward. But they signed that on November 30th, excuse me, and submitted that to the SIB. A couple of key points. While the results of the meeting on October 14th were very favorable, there was some additional work that was needed to be performed as a result of the meeting and the recommendations for further evaluation. We asked our consultant teams of HDR and MKSK to do a little bit more work. The first was for HDR to evaluate the cost and the cost differential between the 1 6-lane bridge versus 2 3-lane bridges that were recommended by town council. That also includes the multi-use bike and ped facilities on the bridge and the cost for the respites or the refuges that were proposed over the one over each of the waterways that the bridge would cross. And it's important to note that, we don't have a county council endorsement of the two bridge option because we need to understand the added cost, and we need to have that discussion with them. We understand this item needs to be addressed as a town council recommendation, and we're working to get those estimates so that town and county council can have meaningful discussion on what that cost differential would be between the two options. We also asked HDR to develop cost estimates for the Gateway Experience treatment. So shifting the alignment on Jenkins Island to allow wider medians and some meandering of the road. In essence, shifting the westbound lanes northward on Jenkins Island. And so they're developing the cost estimates that are part of that recommendation. Again, relatively positive feedback from the county and state on that, but there will be some additional costs that are part of the discussion going forward, and we should have those estimates here hopefully in the near future. Then MKSK was outlined with revising the illustrative concepts that you have seen to date to reflect the preliminary response and outcome to the meeting that we had. So that we have a baseline, so we know which project elements are part of the county project, the county and state project within their scope, and those elements that would lie outside of the scope, but still are part of the overall corridor project and items that would be addressed by the town, the county, or a combination of the two. There still may be some alternative funding at the state level, not necessarily with SCDOT, but at the state level that would allow us to move some of those things forward, but not necessarily coupled with the project that was outlined and proposed to the State Infrastructure Bank and being outlined now as a preferred alternative. So that's additional work that we have engaged our consultants in. Beaufort County at the same time has asked their consultant, KCI. They've been the lead engineering firm for the project. And they've been tasked with outlining the same thing, developing a cost estimate for the 1 versus 2 bridge option. We thought it would be best to have both consultants developing these estimates so we'd be able to compare the estimates going forward. And I know the groups have been working together, and we should have those estimates here shortly. They're also looking at additional evaluation of the performance included in the recommendations by council. We were proposing a completely different intersection treatment than what was shared during the public hearing and the preferred alternative from the county and the state. They're conducting additional performance evaluation as well as land impacts. It takes a little bit of time. I know they're doing some additional survey work and archaeological as an impact to shifting roadways on Jenkins and different intersection treatments and how they impact the project. Again, favorable in that they're doing the evaluation and that the local input is part of this NEPA process. And it's not just an engineering single point U-turn solution. It's a balance of everything. And we'll have a better understanding of performance and the land disturbance, especially in the Stony area, and what those impacts would be, and have that for discussion before the final preferred alternative is released. And SCDOT is working. While we had some preliminary response and good feelings at the meeting on October 14th, the SCDOT team is formally working to respond to the recommendations that council approved and were provided to them right after the October 12th meeting. And so that kind of gives you an idea of the activity that's happened, additional work that we've ordered up and are expecting here soon. And then here's some key next steps as we move forward on this project. We need to receive and review the cost estimates from both HDR and KCI. related to bridge cost. It's the 1 versus 2 bridges. It's the bike and ped facilities. It's the refuges, and also the treatment on Jenkins Island, that Gateway Experience, the differential in cost between what was proposed and what we recommended. We also need to receive and review the official response from SCDOT to all the town recommendations. We will work to finalize that illustrative concept from MKSK outlining a new baseline for project discussion, which includes the elements that are part of the scope that lie within as well as outside of the project scope. I think when we have that information, it would be good to have a joint meeting with town and county councils to understand alignment, to understand perspectives from the leadership at the town and county on the project recommendations, and have that information to work toward a final local position. And then we'll continue regular coordination with the county and state and DOT as project partners. I know in my last conversation, excuse me, with Jared Fralix at the county, he was, after the first of the year, was going to develop, I think, a regular update process for the project and manage the project from here to the end of the county standpoint, and will provide those updates to me to share with council at a regular interval. But that concludes kind of my update, what we're currently working on, the next steps that I think are important for us to tackle, and hopefully have more information here in the near future and be back before you to provide you that information. I'm available for questions or comments.
Question by members of council?
Mayor, I have a couple.
Okay.
Sean, good presentation. I really appreciate your leadership in pushing this project through. Question, I think I understand SIB and SCDO's position regarding funding. They say this is the way we want to do it. If you want to do something else, you're going to have to come up with funding. So I guess there are two questions that come out of that. Is it a political malleable amount that SIB and SCDOT can fund? In other words, given the right circumstances, would they find more money? The second part of that question is, if that number is not malleable, how many sources of additional funding have you identified either at the state or federal level? The second level of question is, okay, so county and town agree that there are certain things that are absolutely necessary for the Gateway Experience, and now we know how much those enhancements are going to cost. Do we then turn over that desire and a commitment for funding wherever we get that money, and SCDOT designs it as a part of their project? So the question there is, who designs what we want? So those are the two questions I have. One is SCDOT SIB funding, whether or not it's political, whether or not we can, what are the other sources of funding, and then who designs the final solution? Thank you.
Yeah, great questions, David. So what we heard from SCDOT on their funding is that they are capped. They have money in the pot to fix the deficient bridge. I'll say that the money has increased over the original estimate, but they indicated that they're at a number and that's fixed. And that was what was stated at the October 14th meeting. The SIB money, the money that was part of the application, 120 million, the outline of the application specified sort of the specific elements that would be part of that project eligible funding. And so I think those are pretty fixed sources of funds. We have not yet uncovered additional sources of funding. until we know kind of what the delta is between the current funds on hand and those that we may need. I don't know if it's a 1 versus 2 bridge until we have that discussion with between town and county council. But we are certainly start looking at alternative funding options to start to address what might be a deficiency in the funding. I think there's some. I think that the second part of your question about integrating those elements as part of the project, I think if there's alternative funding sources that can be combined on the project, then I think that's what we should do. There may be implementation of those elements that are done concurrently or post-project that we can look for funding sources to implement.
Okay, I've hung around these kinds of projects for a number of years. I've always been impressed that at the 11th hour, absolute budgets are malleable given the right kind of pressure. So, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. Thank you. Sean, thank you for the detailed report. In the beginning, in the start of your report, you several times mentioned that there was strong support. Are you saying there was strong support from Secretary Hall and the DOT people, or who was involved?
Yes, sir. The Secretary Hall and her staff, we had the county administrator and his staff. There was, again, general agreement on nearly all of the recommendations. There are some that required additional evaluation, as I mentioned, the local, what we were recommending for intersection improvements and some other things. But yes, sir, SCDOT and county general agreement with the recommendations that were submitted.
That's really good news that those MKSK revisions are getting a positive response, and I'm very pleased about that. Secondly, comment, I agree with you completely that we need to have some joint meetings with county council to make sure that everyone is on the same page about this project. I look forward to receiving the estimates for these additional provision or parts of the project so that we can understand what it is we're dealing with. Right now, we don't have our arms around that very well, but that's not your fault or anyone's. We'll get that information and look forward to receiving it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sean, Happy New Year. Thank you very much for the report. You mentioned that KCI and MKSK will be working on, I guess, cost figures associated with the recommendations. Will all 26 of those recommendations have a cost figure associated with them?
Well, we haven't ordered up estimates on all 26 recommendations. Many of the recommendations that were made by council, and I'll give you some examples, like the adaptive signal technology, the smart signals. While that's a recommendation that we've made locally, it's built in as part of the project. There's several other elements that we were recommending that there was agreement that would be part of the project. And then there's some that are outside of what the DOT and would outline as a project scope. And so there won't be cost estimates done from our consultants on every element. Those key elements that will have a significant impact on budget. And so the 1 versus 2 bridge, the gateway experience through Jenkins Island, the respites on the bike and ped facility on the bridge, those were the key, those are the most significant elements to impact project budget. And so those are the ones that we've got our consultants working on.
Okay, I'm going to push back a little bit on that one, Sean, just because I think it's important. I mean, the 26 recommendations were discussed and approved by Hilton Head Town Council. So to me, each and every one of them are desperately important. And while I can appreciate us focusing on the bigger ticket items, so to speak, I think that when we talk about money, it doesn't matter if it's $1 or $5, it's still money that we'll have to go after, okay? And to be completely transparent with the public as to how we are bettering the situation, I think that we need to have a full accounting of what we're trying to accomplish. The other thing that is missing from the discussion, and MKSK's efforts, they always started with the guiding principles that were adopted by Hilton Head Town Council and Beaufort County Council. And those need to continue to be in the front of everybody's minds, particularly if we're going to start to have joint discussions about this. That is not something that only Hilton Head agreed on. We both agreed on those. And the one word that sticks out in those guiding principles for me is the word improve. So I think the lines are being drawn fairly clearly here with SCDOT and the monies that are available, saying, hey, we've got a baseline project that we've created, and that's where we're going. If you want to improve, then it's on you. And the county needs to be on the exact same sheet of paper with us as we move forward. And I'm not quite sure that is clearly defined at the moment. So I just appreciate that we put the guiding principles back in front as we have this discussion jointly. I know you're working hard on this, Sean. It's not an easy task by any means, but it's a once in a lifetime project that we're talking about here. We all know the significance of it. That's why we've had so many discussions around it. That's why we've committed to these recommendations. The only thing is that the county, with all due respect, they're not here on a daily basis dealing with our residents that we say that we're putting first. So we just need to make sure that that's very, very clear moving forward. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Tammy?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So, hi, Sean. Happy New Year. I have a couple of questions to follow up on. And I'm just going to start in any random order here, but thinking about residents first. There were an awful lot of feedback questions asked to SCODT that we were waiting for their responses to. I'm hoping that all those residents got their responses, but did town also get a copy of those responses? And if so, have they been reviewed?
We have not yet received responses to all the public comments we've asked. I'll ask again. I think it's important to get the response to that, but also the council recommendations here in the near future, right? So we can have that information to make more informed decisions. So I'll request again. I know that they said they would send it, but I'll make the request again.
Thank you. The reason I think it's important is for all the obvious ones, but I'll just state it. We're doing something here that impacts our residents. And so until their voices are heard, not only by us, but by SCDOT and the county, we really don't have a firm handle on what direction we should be taking this in. And then that brings us to the 26 recommendations that did come from council, and wondering, similarly, I guess, to Mr. Brown, about how that was hand selected, I guess, in terms of which ones would be prioritized with regard to cost. I'm assuming that doesn't mean that the others were discarded, but the others were of less significance and therefore not made the top priority, so that the larger chunk of money that might be necessary can be viewed as a whole there. Does that make sense? Is that true?
It does. I would say that there's some recommendations that were cost neutral or provided positive impact to budget, reducing some lane widths. Switch into a more intuitive intersection than what was being proposed. As I
Mhm.
mentioned, the smart signal technology was already part of what was built in. So there's no additional cost to that recommendation.
Mhm.
Varying median widths. And so there's a lot of it that doesn't have a significant impact or is already would be part of the project scope. And so it was, there's some key project recommendations. The 2 bridges is probably the most significant impact to cost.
Mhm.
Shifting the Jenkins Island roadway alignment to create that gateway is probably second on that list. And then there's some other things related to the bike and ped facilities on the bridge and the respites and some other. So we're trying to gauge those bigger dollar elements. Knowing that a lot of the other ones are either built into the project or were agreed to be incorporated into the project scope.
Great, and that's a really good answer, and a lot of what I figured. You said it much more clearly than I think I had stated it in my question. But that does bring me to the idea of the smart traffic signal piece that is already built into the project. While I realize these monies aren't necessarily coming from the town, is there a way perhaps, since that very well could be a significant piece of what accomplishes what the stated goals were, that we could begin to implement something along those lines to see if in fact we could resolve some of our issues simply through that signaling project. So I'm not sure if that's a question you can answer, but it is a question that I would like to have some thoughts on. So if we can put that a big question mark by it, and if someone could get back to me with what could be done maybe now or soon.
Maybe
regarding that.
Mark can address that when Sean's finished, okay?
That's good. Thank you. That would be
Yeah,
perfect.
I'm sorry, can I respond to that for a second?
Sure.
And then, I don't know, Mark, I know this is an important item. Mark and I have talked about this. In the LATS long range transportation plan, there were 2 projects in the previous version where they're working to update it now. But the one project was the bridge replacement as a identified project. And the other one that would impact Hilton Head was the smart signal technology. Not just through this segment of corridor, but through the entire US 278 William Hilton Parkway corridor. We've kept that on the forefront of our list of priorities. We'll push for your support to include that in the LATS update, make sure that there's still a prioritization of that regionally. So I don't know about a short-term implementation of a project just for this corridor, but that's a long-term goal to have those capabilities throughout the corridor from I-95 to Sea Pine Circle at some point. Sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to jump in if you had comments.
No, Sean, you pretty much said it well, and I think that we can rest on the fact that it is in the long-range transportation study, and so that last study is really provided to us as a regional model with a lot of involvement from Eric Greenway, who's been a big help on the William Hilton Gateway project, but also in some of our bigger picture discussions on how to implement that LATS study and the recommendation of the project. So in next year's capital improvement program, which, believe it or not, we kicked off, Mr. Troyer, Josh and I kicked off budget yesterday to get going on things. What I anticipate is bringing forward to town council for consideration to add to the fiscal year 23, which is 5.5 months away from going live, more or less, an entire signalized system on our island of that smart technology signalization system, like the one that I mentioned and saw firsthand on Johnny Dodds Boulevard. So when it's in our CIP program, we will find the dollars. And I do believe that there are dollars to be had from the federal government through the stimulus bill as it affects transportation projects and regional systems. I can't speak for the county. I can share with you that I've had the conversation with Mr. Greenway, and then as an aside with his staff about a system that's larger than just on our island. And I know they're aware of that system. There's been a lot of community members that are bringing that system to our attention. We've known about it for a long time. I think that this is the year to perhaps satisfy the regional transportation study and put it into our own CIP. That way we know it's important to us, it's prioritized, and let us find some dollars. We don't have them today. The project's affordable, whether it's federal dollars, state dollars, some town dollar match. I don't know what that formula is, but it's coming. And I assure you that we'll have a good recommendation. We don't have one today. Ms. Becker, you raise a good question. Should we put one of these cameras in at one intersection and get going on it? From what I understand from some folks, one might not help. I think it needs to be a series of them. And so please know that that is heavy on our list and a high priority.
Right, and thank you. All of that is certainly excitedly anticipated for the future. To the extent, though, that it could be something that we're looking at to help offset the need for this 278 corridor project and perhaps reduce some of the costs and the impacts to the island more broadly, I think it might be worth another discussion and look at that. So just bringing that up as a thought, and we'll follow up with it in the next month or so, see what additional conversations could be had with regard to that. The other question that I guess I have here is somewhat related. What, if anything, is happening? There's happening behind the scenes that Hilton Head is being noticed about, informed about, but not necessarily participating in. The conversations and the meetings that have been reported are very good, and I'm very happy to see council and town taking a leadership role in this overall project. But I'm just curious as to what else we're being informed about that's happening that we're not necessarily participating in. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, so my response to that is no, not at this point. Beaufort County is working with their consultants, and DOT is a managing entity for the project to do additional evaluation. And again, to get these cost estimates, just like we're working kind of concurrently, but on our own to get this information. I think once we have that, the responses to our recommendations, the public input, then again, we'll come back. I think moving forward, regular updates to council. I think the county, Jared Freilich mentioned having a regular interval for updates moving forward in this new year. And so I think it would be good to coordinate those efforts, but I'm not aware of any offline meetings or anything that's happening other than staffs are working hard to get information and to bring forward to their leadership that information to inform decisions going forward.
So everything in the intergovernmental agreement that was signed, we're fully aware of and have that structure and information at our disposal. Okay. And then I guess those estimates as we're talking about them and the need for additional funding that may come from that. I guess it relates back to my curiosity about whether or not we could look to see about this signaling device as an offset to any of those project costs. And then overall, whether or not the project as a whole, quite honestly, is just unaffordable and unattainable. And whether or not what we were promised through a penny tax and the additional monies that have come forth with the 120 million, that it's just not fully feasible to accomplish this project, which I believe is part of the original conversations from the beginning as to we're going down a road and we don't know where the money is at, whether we can afford it or whether it's worth our money, given the reports, the SCDOT's report of the level of service and what are the gains and what are the detriments and consequences long-term. So I still think those are still real considerations that need to be part of the conversation as we're looking at those cost estimates coming forward and what they address. So those are all my comments, questions, and I thank you all for your help.
Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Sean, thanks for all the good work on this project. It's certainly a considerable effort on your part. I would like to focus my questions on only one point. That's the single versus the two-span bridge system. And so if you allow me, I'll just go over the questions, and that can lead to discussion or answers later. But and some of these you won't be able to answer, but I'll begin with this. What is the realistic time frame to determine the cost of a one-span versus a two-span bridge system? And there are two sources to answer that question. One would be at the state level, and the second would be from our consultants. So that's one question. The next is, informally, we must be hearing something from our consultants, even though maybe we don't have anything in writing. What can you share with us informally on their opinion on a one versus a two-span system? In the event that a whatever we choose is beyond our current identified sources of revenue, what is the universe of potential other sources of revenue? And then related to that question, what are we doing now, if anything, to identify these potential sources and to test the probability of success? And I guess the final one is that if the cost of two bridges versus one is beyond our reach, given all possible sources of revenue, are we prepared as a council to adopt a single bridge approach? Thank you.
So I can answer the last question, but a reasonable time frame for the estimates that we're having HDR and KCI develop. I think we'll have those here this month in January. We'll have that information. We had preliminary sort of ballpark estimates in our discussion back in October of a 10 to 15% project increase with a two bridge option, but I think the numbers are going to be somewhere in that range. But I want to throw a number out there until we have that. I think we're very close to getting that information. As far as the universe of other sources of fundings, we need to have that conversation to look at, again, with the county, I think, to identify potential alternative funding opportunities. It's unlikely to be the town applying for these on their own. It would be the town in support of the county's project and looking at alternative funding sources to enhance project budget if needed. So again, I think we need to have that delta in cost between the options, an appetite from town and county councils on what elements they think merit inclusion, and then and to work to identify alternative funding sources if there is that delta of additional funds that are needed.
Mr. Lennox.
Thank you, John. And Sean, thanks for the update. I continue to have a lot of confidence in you as our quarterback on this project. Keep it going. I had three comments rather than questions. The first is, I think the way you presented the next steps, in my opinion, is logical and appropriate, and I'm ready to fall in lockstep behind that. The second is the intergovernmental agreement. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I would encourage all of council to read it. It puts a lot of responsibility throughout this entire project on the county and we are not mentioned in the agreement. So take a look at that, and we're going to have to make certain that the county has the wherewithal to perform under the IGA. And my last comment is more of a concern, and I think, Sean, as you move forward in this project, you will more clearly define the answer to this concern, and that is that we not put any SCDOT, infrastructure bank, or sales tax funding at risk if we incorporate and agree to fund town recommendations and changes. So as you talk about that increment, Sean, that may be required for a town recommended change, let's make certain that we have the funding on the baseline in addition to the incremental funding required for the change.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I just have one question. I'm sorry, Tom, you finished?
Yes, thanks, Sean.
I just have one question, Sean. It appears that we need a little more updating and education to the people who live on the side streets off 278 by the Stony area there. And if you could do something, let us know what you're doing, I'd appreciate it, because we spent all our time, people on Stony on 278, and very little time, if any, on the side streets. Just for knowledge, give them an update as to what's going on. I think everybody would appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Understood.
With that, thank you very much, Sean, and we'll hear from you very soon, I hope. Okay, new business.
Excuse me, Mayor McCann.
Oh, yes, Mr. Hogan's with us now. Done?
Okay, actually, no, he has not joined the meeting. He did not join the meeting. He has received all of the information to join and he did not join.
Okay, new business. Consider a resolution authorizing the submission of a town pathway projects in Beaufort County Connects. That's bike and pedestrian plan.
Mayor, I can make a motion if you will.
Yes, please.
I move the approval of the resolution to authorize submission of the town pathway projects currently in the CIP or adopted plans be included in the Beaufort County Connects Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan 2021.
Second.
Second, Mr. Stanford. Any discussion on this? Mr. Stanford?
Thank you. In the Public Planning Committee meeting where this was discussed and presented, I wanted to make clear that we were not giving up any authority having to do with where and how we go about placing these paths, but rather what we're doing is providing adequate connections to make a broader system. So I think it's a worthy idea to have a broader county path project, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Ames.
I would like the public to hear what the interdependency or separation of financial sources of funds are in this plan.
You can, I'm going to defer. I see Missy on there and I see Sean on there. Mr.
Yeah, Missy's here. I didn't see her, but she's on point to be able to answer.
Sure. Hi,
Is that question clear?
The interdepartmental funds or?
No. What I'm asking for is the whether or not by joining this Connect plan, we are obligating, the town of Hilton Head is obligating itself to funding beyond the CIP or its pedestrian bike plans on the island.
Missy Lewick, Senior Planner for the record. By participating in the plan, there's no obligation on the town's behalf or any of the participants with projects in the plan to provide additional funding for projects outside of their jurisdiction. It's a collaborative plan to have 80 identified projects, pathway projects countywide, and the town has 16 projects that are included within the plan. There is an advantage of the projects within the plan in such related to funding in such that the projects are put into the LATS long-range transportation plan. There are other grant or outside funding sources that are available that could offset some of our funding that had been identified in our CIP. And so it could provide additional funds for other projects for the town.
Thank you, Missy. I appreciate the information. I'm sure the public does as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on this? Christian, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir, I certainly will. I apologize.
Mr. Mayor, I think Councilwoman Lecca had a question. She had a hand up.
Well, thank you for that, for that. My questions were, I just wanted to thank both David and Glenn for their questions because they were related to the specific questions that I had when it came through the committee, and hearing them satisfied again makes me a supporter of the motion. So thank you.
Okay, Krista.
All right, sir. Mr. Brown,
Support?
Mr. Ames,
Yes.
Mr. Harkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Becker,
Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Lennox,
Yes.
Mr. Stanford,
Yes.
Mayor McCann,
Yes.
motion carries. Sir.
Item 12B, first reading of proposal ordinance 20-22-01, authorizing the execution of a termination of an easement located at 9 Bayberry Lane, Hilton Head, South Carolina.
Mayor, that one
Move
also
for-
came through the Public Planning Committee, and I move the release of the beach nourishment easement located on 9 Bayberry Street.
Second.
Second, any discussion on this item? Okay, Krista, call the roll.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Brown,
Support?
Mr. Harkins,
Yes.
Mr. Ames,
Yes.
Mrs. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Lennox,
Yes.
Mr. Stanford,
Yes.
Mayor McCann,
Yes.
motion carries, sir.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, yes,
I
Ms.
think
Stanford.
it's important when we have a motion that the public get at least a glimpse of what was going on behind this. When the first renourishment project occurred on Hilton Head, there was a need for access to the beach for the beach renourishment equipment. And at that time, Bayberry Street and the property owners in question granted that easement. We no longer need the easement, and therefore this recommendation or this motion was to evacuate or eradicate that easement. Thank you.
A good point, Ms. Ames, but I think on all new business, we should have a small paragraph explaining what we're talking about.
Yep.
We will take care of that in the future.
Okay.
Ms. Becker?
Yeah, no, nothing. I agree.
Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So move.
Move.
Second, all in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you very much, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Great night.
You want mute?
We're 22. We're leaving.
Recording stopped.